I don't have to be pedal to the metal in this area of my life all the time in order to be successful. Doing my best gets to be enough. I don't always have to be optimizing everything in my life, because I think for so long I felt like if I wasn't constantly growing in my business all the time, if I wasn't constantly growing in my relationship all the time, then something was wrong. But there are still ways that you can rest or maintain growth that you've already had. You don't have to constantly be pushing things forward at full steam ahead. Hi, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Sarah Yudkin, and I'm a relationship anxiety coach who's here to help you learn about all things love, relationships, and how to navigate anxiety in your relationships. If relationships are really meaningful to you and you've gotten any value from my videos so far, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to my channel and become a member of the You Love and You Learn community. This goes a long way to supporting me in this channel and makes sure that you don't miss any new videos coming out. And if you enjoy this video, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a like and a comment so I know what's resonating. Thank you for watching, and let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Excited as always that you are here spending your time with me. So thank you so much. Today, I want to talk about this idea that popped up in a coaching session recently. And it was actually when I was being coached. And in case you hadn't heard me talking about this recently, I have a coach that I've been working with over the last, let's say, month and a half. At this point, when the episode comes out, it will probably have been close to 2 months. And we had an aha moment in session, or we kind of came to a shared aha moment in a session, that I typically have a lot of intensity around things that are important in my life. And this has shown up in multiple areas of my life before. But while some level of intensity can be helpful, I've kind of learned and seen now that it can cross a threshold where it becomes unhelpful, having intensity about something in your life. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And today I'm going to talk about these 2 key areas I have noticed intensity popping up. I'm going to talk about what the intensity kind of looks like, why I think it's popped up, and then the mindset shifts I'm practicing to release intensity and what that looks like in my life. So not only like what are the mindset shifts I'm practicing to release intensity, but what are the actions I'm taking, or the things that look different when I am not constantly being intense about something. So before we get into all of that, I wanted to define what intense means. I looked it up, and the definitions that resonated most for the sake of this conversation were extreme force, degree, or strength. So we're very intense about something when it's there's a lot of force behind it, there's a lot of strength behind it. And then another definition of intense is extremely earnest or serious. So when things feel just more serious, and it's almost like this heaviness, and everything has to be done a certain way, right? So without further ado, the 2 key areas that I have noticed the intensity in my life pop up are in my relationship and then in my business. In my relationship, I think the intensity kind of boiled over and hit its peak back in 2020 when I had my big relationship anxiety breakdown, where I sobbed to Nate and said, I don't know if I love you the same anymore. This was the culmination of the kind of intensity that had been forming around my relationship. Whereas now, 5 years later, I am seeing that the intensity that I've had over the last 5 years in my business is, I would say, contributing right now to where I'm at, where I'm feeling this messy middle, or I'm feeling stuckness, or I'm feeling some pressure. And I'm kind of noticing this as a pattern where it's, the intensity and force and seriousness and strength that I have been moving forward with for my business for the last 5 years is reaching its head, where there's like this big intensity around it. And I'm kind of pausing and acknowledging, okay, maybe there are some processes that need to change, or maybe the way I've been doing things isn't quite working the way it used to for me. So, the way I define intensity and like what it actually looks like when it's happening is when I'm constantly thinking about the thing at hand. So, whether it's when I was really focused on things in my relationship, constantly thinking about those, or whether it's like I'm constantly thinking about what should I be doing for work, or constantly thinking about my to-do list. That's part of what intensity looks like. It's worrying about the future and if everything will be okay, almost like this ongoing stream of worries. It can look like being critical of myself for not being able to respond, quote, better to the situation I'm in. So, feeling frustrated that I was experiencing anxiety in my relationship, feeling frustrated that I am stuck in my business, right? Like being critical of that. That's kind of the intensity of feeling like everything should be perfect. And if it's not, then something's wrong with me. Other ways intensity shows up for me is feeling behind and thinking other people are ahead of me, feeling overwhelmed or out of control, being frustrated more easily with challenges that come up. Like if there's an inconvenience or something doesn't go how I expect it to, feeling frustrated by that. Feeling less hopeful and optimistic about being able to handle whatever is coming up. So whether it used to be in my relationship where I was like, oh, like another trigger came up, I can't believe that. Or in my business now, I'm definitely a little bit further along than I used to be when I respond to these frustrations, but maybe kind of being frustrated of, I should know better how to make this pivot in my business, or I should know that everything will be okay in the future. Those types of thoughts. Intensity can also look like trying to figure things out before they are actually available to be figured out, like trying to rush to certainty or to some answer of what everything's going to be okay and making sure that everything's all under control, but that's not necessarily available yet. So for my current process with my business, like trying to figure out exactly what I want to do in the next chapter of You Love and You Learn, I keep trying to rush that answer, but I need to slow down and be patient and figure out the process. But that's kind of a classic example of intensity, is like, I have to figure this out now. I have to move faster. I have to rush through the discomfort. So that's kind of giving you a sense, and maybe you can resonate with some of these things about what it might feel like or look like if you are in a state of intensity. Constant thinking, worrying, being critical, feeling behind, overwhelmed, out of control, feeling frustrated, less hopeful, trying to rush to an answer, and trying to rush through feelings of discomfort. Those are kind of some signals, at least for me, that maybe there's a lot of intensity around a certain subject, and I might want to invite myself out of that intensity. So those are the patterns I've really been noticing, and I've seen them before. I've seen them come up. And now I want to get into why I believe intensity pops up, because I don't think that the intensity is actually the root challenge, if you will. I think intensity and the symptoms of intensity are a byproduct of deeper things, like the deeper fears I have about myself and my worthiness. So if I feel unworthy or feel not enough, then that spills into how I think about my relationships or think about my work. Not prioritizing or consistently maintaining my needs leads to feeling overwhelmed, or leads to feeling like I have to be super intensely focused on relationships or work instead of actually focusing on meeting my own needs. Definitely perfectionism, the intensity of I have to be doing everything, firing at all cylinders perfectly all the time and make sure everything's under control. Comparison, comparing my relationship or business to other people and feeling like everyone else has it all figured out, but I don't. And so then there's this increased intensity of like, I have to, get to where they are. I think it can pop up from a lack of self-trust. So when we want there to be a right path, or when I want someone to tell me what to do, like I just wish there was a clear answer of, is this the relationship I want to be in or not? Or I wish someone could just tell me what is the exact way I should run my business, right? That lack of self-trust can contribute to an intensity of feeling frazzled and having to figure it out and like, why can't someone just tell me the answer? And it almost comes from this urgency mode. I think intensity can pop up when we come from a fixed mindset, when we come from the fixed mindset that says things are either good or bad, or right or wrong, or things are either going well or not well. And then we feel like we have to make sure that everything is going good and that everything is right. It can also come from the victim mindset, which says, oh, like this is so hard, or I can't do this, or everyone else seems to be having an easier time than I am. And then it creates this intensity where we just are constantly feeling down or upset or ashamed of ourselves. And then, last but certainly not least, intensity can come from the inner critic versus when we practice self compassion. Because when our inner critic is loud and we're not able to practice compassion or not able to practice acceptance of the experience we have, then there can be, again, a heightened amount of intensity. Now, all of these things that I just shared, these deeper root patterns, the things that can affect the level of intensity we experience around our relationship or work or anything like that, the fears we have about ourselves and the world around us, our needs, and if we're meeting them intentionally, perfectionism, comparison, lack of self-trust, coming from a victim mindset, coming from a fixed mindset, and not practicing self-compassion and radical acceptance. These are some of the things that I walk you through in the Relationship Anxiety Toolkit. And I'm very excited because in May, actually, coming up in the next couple weeks, May 7th through 9th, I am going to be running a wedding sale on the Relationship Anxiety Toolkit. So check out the link in the show notes to join the waitlist for the wedding sale. And if you're listening to this after the sale has already happened, you can still go ahead and get the toolkit. But the toolkit is basically walking you through the deeper patterns that happen inside of us that contribute to more intensity and more anxiety in our life, and how to begin breaking free from these patterns. And it's a 21-day guide broken down into bite-sized chunks to help you learn new ways to show up in your life and in your relationships in a more confident and calm way. So definitely check out the show notes for more on that if you're interested. Now, I want to get into some of the mindset shifts I am practicing to release intensity in my life. Some of those are, I don't have to have everything perfect or figured out in my relationship or in my work life in order to move forward. This one's important because the perfectionist wants us to know exactly how everything is going to turn out before we take any steps. But actually taking bite-sized steps and moving forward, even when you don't know everything, or even when not everything is perfectly figured out, is part of how you show yourself that you're safe. So that's a really big one. Another mindset shift is I don't have to prioritize a certain area of my life at the expense of other areas in my life. So recently, I'm realizing that the intensity of prioritizing work, just like above everything in my life, can come at the cost of personal things. And also, I'm realizing that in this season of life as well, there's so many personal things that are coming up, like the wedding and honeymoon and all of that. And so I don't have to necessarily have work being an even priority that it once was when I have so many personal things going on. And so it's okay to compartmentalize sometimes and not always have certain areas of our life be this huge focus. Another mindset shift I'm practicing to release intensity is I don't have to be pedal to the metal in this area of my life all the time in order to be successful. Doing my best gets to be enough. I don't always have to be optimizing everything in my life, because I think for so long I felt like if I wasn't constantly growing in my business all the time, if I wasn't constantly growing in my relationship all the time, then something was wrong. But there are still ways that you can rest or maintain growth that you've already had. You don't have to constantly be pushing things forward at full steam ahead. And that's just not possible, I feel like, for my energy levels anymore to be doing, pushing everything full steam ahead. It's no longer working for me. So releasing the need to be pedal to the metal all the time. And then the second to last mindset shift here is I am allowed to have fun and release the pressure in this area of my life. So this was a big one for me. I feel like with relationships, like there was a point where everything was just so analytical in my head that I feel like I wasn't allowing myself to just let loose and have fun as much as I used to. And so I had to realize like it's okay to just have fun. Like I don't have to be constantly analyzing or nitpicking this thing. And the same has been an invitation recently in my business. Like, how can I make this enjoyable? How can I make this lighter or more fun? And I haven't necessarily gotten all those answers yet, but I think that the mindset of I need to just have this be intense and go, go, go all the time is making some things feel less fun. And so I want to try to invite more of that fun and lightness back into work and continuing to allow that in other areas of my life as well. And then credit to my coach for this one, but she shared your business, your creativity, and your life don't have to be puzzles to solve, but they can be experiences to be lived. So we don't have to solve everything, but we can just experience and live our life. So really loved that one as well. Now I want to get into what is changing my level of intensity look like in my life right now. So I kind of just shared, what I noticed when things were feeling really intense. I shared the mindset shifts that I'm practicing actively to move away from things feeling so intense, but I want to give tangible examples of what that looks like in my life, both for my relationship and work, so that you can understand how you might be able to implement some of this for yourself. So in my relationship, this has been an ongoing practice. And I feel like in my relationship, I have definitely decreased the intensity a lot. So I would say this is a stronger category for me right now, relationship wise. But examples of less intensity are not thinking about the relationship all the time. And when I notice myself thinking about the relationship, shifting inwardly to, okay, do I need to practice filling up my cup? Even if I have certain things about the relationship right now that could use some work, like, are there things that I'm also doing to not meet my needs right now? And how can I be more intentional about that? So less thinking about the relationship all the time, more filling my cup. Another way to decrease intensity in relationships that I practice is continuing to bring myself back to the present moment if I get caught in future what ifs, because future what ifs can feel very intense. Like, oh my God, I have to figure this out. What if this doesn't work out? What if this quality bothers me? What if this? What if that? Like, that's a very intense thing that pops up, I feel, those thought patterns. And so learning to bring myself back to the present moment and what is happening right now versus what might be happening in 5 months or 5 years from now. Another way I've learned to decrease intensity in my relationship is letting myself move on, even if I messed up or something annoying happened. So let's say that I was snippy towards Nate. I used to beat myself up, and I feel like that was a very intense way of just like processing whatever happened in the relationship. I would like go back and ruminate about it and think about it and blame myself and like, oh, I shouldn't have said it that way. And I feel like that just created more energy around that thing. And even if something Nate did annoyed me, like I'm able to just kind of be like, oh, that was annoying, or maybe say something about it and then move forward more easily versus like, oh my gosh, what does this mean about him or about us? So learning to actively just process what just happened and then move on from it decreases intensity. And a lot of that comes from not adding extra meaning onto it. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or they're a bad person. It was just an annoying thing that came up, or you just did something that you weren't so proud of. Like, you don't have to keep harping on it. Another way that I've decreased intensity in my relationship is not feeling like I have to keep this running tab of everything that we should be doing. We should be having sex this amount, so I'm going to like keep thinking about how often we've had sex. Or we should be going on more cute dates when we plan our wedding. So instead of doing this wedding meeting at home, like let's go to a cafe and do that, right? Like I've been less focused on what our relationship looks like from the outside and more on how it feels from the inside. And that to me has reduced a lot of intensity because I don't feel like I'm having to perform for other people anymore, which is huge. And that has come from shifting my relationship to comparison and perfectionism for sure. And that's kind of the final thing I shared is relationship wise, I think that things felt a lot more intense when I learned to shift perfectionist beliefs that said everything always had to be looking this way or everything had to always be going this way, and actually just leaning into like, okay, we're imperfect, he's imperfect, I'm imperfect, not everything's going to go perfectly, and that's okay. So those are examples of lessening the intensity in relationships. I would love to hear if you have any other ideas about how to do so. You're more than welcome to leave a comment if you're listening on Spotify, or send a DM to You Love and You Learn if you have other ideas or ways you've noticed having less intensity in your relationship. Maybe you've seen yourself grow in this area as well. Now, let's talk about what reducing intensity looks like for work. Now, I will be just transparent and say this one's a little bit newer for me. I am still actively practicing this one more because I'm just starting to realize that I did have this level of intensity for work over the last 5 years. So I'm kind of in the very baby stages of realizing, ooh, I think there's some room to decrease the intensity. And what it's looking like for me right now is allowing myself to do more of maintenance activities instead of focusing on strategies for growing my business right now, especially with the wedding coming up. I feel like the first half of this year is really about allowing myself to focus on that exciting life change happening instead of, okay, well, I have to be constantly moving in my business and planning this wedding and planning like the honeymoon with Nate and doing all these things, right? So allowing myself to like just do business as usual and not needing to be constantly growing. And this one has felt uncomfortable because I think for the last 5 years, my brain has been so wired to grow, and try new things all the time. So that's the first thing I'm practicing. The second thing I'm doing is allowing myself to compartmentalize the wedding and this work limbo period I'm in, because as I've kind of alluded to, I'm feeling like there are changes on the horizon with how I work or the things that I do process wise, or maybe even the title I call myself. I'm not 100% sure yet, but the other day I wrote in an email that I feel like the title of relationship anxiety coach is no longer resonating in the same way that it used to, because I no longer identify as deeply with the experience of relationship anxiety. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the experience. It doesn't mean that it won't always be a part of who I am. And it doesn't mean that I won't still be helping people with that experience. But it feels very limiting as a title to call myself now, because I feel like the work I do is so much more than that. And it was really never about relationship anxiety. It was about the perfectionism, the comparison, the beliefs we have about relationships, the needs that are unmet and how to learn to meet them, like communication. All of those things are actually the deeper reasons why the symptoms of relationship anxiety shows up. So even though I kind of know that I'm on the horizon of change, or changes on the horizon, or whatever you would want to call it, I feel like right now my brain just can't hold space for all of those potential changes. And I don't really have the energy to focus on what those changes might look like. So allowing myself to compartmentalize and just say, hey, I don't have to think about that right now, even though I know that it's coming. I don't have to focus on the wedding and focus on what the changes in my business are going to be quite yet. So that's another really important one for me that has helped me feel less intense and less rushed to kind of get to this next chapter in my business. Getting support from a coach to help me process, that's helped me feel less intense around things because I've had a space to share and I've had someone to help me continue to practice being more compassionate with myself And I've felt lighter after kind of getting some of these thoughts out into the open and just being able to workshop them with my coach. And that is why, I mean, even though obviously it's kind of cheesy for me to say, I love coaching. Like, I do love the work I do, obviously, because I love getting to support clients, but I love being a client as well. Like, I love getting coached. And so, call me cheesy. I'm not trying to have a shameless plug for coaching here, but I genuinely just feel like having support from someone who can really like see you and understand what you're going through and validate that it's okay to feel the way you feel and help you create little bite-sized steps to move forward. Like, that has helped things feel way less intense for me. And it's really been so monumental for me actually slowing down. And this whole idea of releasing intensity wouldn't have even come up for me if I hadn't been working with a coach. So, very grateful for that. Another thing that's helped me shift in my levels of intensity with work is just less social media content or less planned content than normal. Like, I've still been fairly consistent over the last month or two with social media, all things considered, but I feel like normally it's like a very intentional, planned part of my business. And I just haven't had the capacity to make it as big of a priority this season. So, just allowing myself to be in a season where I'm not growing as much or doing as much online has been a very important part of this. And also being honest with where I'm at with my community on social media was really important for me to release some of the intensity that I was feeling and pressure I was putting on myself. So that's kind of a sidebar. But the last piece of this is that coming up over the next 2 months in May and June, another way that I'm going to release intensity in the work part of my life is allowing myself to do every other week for podcasts, and then even repeating potentially some old episodes. I've done a couple of rewinds, if you will, or just like bringing back old episodes that were from multiple years ago in case you haven't heard them, because there's still really important information in there. And just giving myself that permission slip of like, it's okay if after 2 years of doing the podcast every single week, you have some space when it's your wedding and honeymoon time, because I have a lot of stuff coming up, and getting all of the episodes ready in advance just felt really intense to me. And so giving myself that like permission, I don't have to do all of that. It's okay. And so that's just a little note if you are listening, that over the next couple of months in May and June, the episodes will be coming out every other month. And so I appreciate your patience with that. And it's just a little gift to myself to release some of the intensity in my work life in this season. So if you are resonating with this episode, I think just kind of like a very small little next step here could be pausing, whether it's right now or later in a journal or sometime after listening to this, to just check, am I bringing a certain intensity to parts of my life, whether it's work or relationships or other areas of my life, like friendships or whatever it is. And just kind of check in if that intensity feels helpful, or if it feels like this urgent, clinging energy of like, I have to make sure everything's perfect and all figured out. And maybe experiment with what would it look like for me to release intensity in this area for a little bit of time, just to test it out. Like, what are some tangible things I might be able to do or practice, or permission slips I would need to give myself in order to release intensity? And just experiment and see how it goes, because there isn't a one right answer to all of this. There isn't a formula. But if you were resonating and if certain areas just feel intense and heavy and too much right now, it could be just part of your own inner expectations that you have to keep moving at that level of intensity. And so you're the one that can actually give yourself permission to slow your roll a bit, or to take the foot off the gas, if you will. All right. Well, thank you as always for listening. It was great to get to kind of process this out loud and almost make this declaration for myself to continue to release intensity in this season. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. Feel free to send me a message if you did on Instagram. And thanks again for listening. See you next time.